PreSnap Podcast on the LineStar YouTube channel alongside my co-host, Tyler Wiemann. I'm Shannon Sommerville, and we've got some potential training camp battles that you should be keeping an eye on as training camp opens up throughout the country. Excited to get going here as we see some maybe potential fantasy studs solidified in this training camp process, seeing, who will rise to the top in some of these battles. We're going to take you through some of those battles that you should particularly keep your eye on, especially if you're playing in contests like Best Ball or getting ready for your season-long fantasy draft. These are people you want to pay attention to, and we're focusing in on kind of the teams and who could kind of break out, right, Tyler?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of these murky spots are, the league winners year after year. And we want to dive into some teams that can give that kind of output.
Yeah, especially in fantasy, volume, workload is basically king. So who's going to get some of that workload is kind of the questions that we're trying to answer in these training camps. And we'll show you some spots to take a look at. Before we get going here, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment below. Also, if you're taking part in some of these best ball drafts, make sure to use our promo code LineStar if you're a new user to Underdog so you can get a deposit match plus 1 free month of the LineStar app. And actually on the LineStar app, we have a specific tool just for best ball. It includes rankings, has a game's heat map so you can see how many implied points certain teams are supposed to score. So you can kind of, use that as a guide to help you out throughout your best ball drafting. So check that out, linestarapp.com. But let's dive into some of these training camp battles. And Tyler, one of the more intriguing places has to be the Chicago Bears, right? Because they've got their second-year quarterback in Caleb Williams, and now with probably one of the most highly sought-after coaching candidates in Ben Johnson coming over from the Detroit Lions to kind of revitalize this Bears offense. They've also solidified the offensive line. So even though they finished last in the division last year, this is a team that could really turn it around. What are you watching here?
I think on this team, we actually have to watch, all of the offensive players, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends. As you said, Ben Johnson came over. He built an amazing offense in Detroit. He rebuilt the offensive line, so there's a chance for that offensive line to make a big step up. And then some more coaching for Caleb, and this offense really could boom. And like I said, on all levels, there are some guys we need to look at and watch the battle.
Yeah, so let's start with the running back here. DeAndre Swift obviously had a career high yards from scrimmage, 1345 for him in 2024, started all 17 games. So likely his role solidified, but after that, a little murky, right?
Well, even DeAndre Swift's role, is it really solidified? I mean, we saw Roschon Johnson come on a little bit at the end of the last year. He had 6 touchdowns last year, and Detroit, used 2 backs. They had a 1A and a 1B with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, maybe it's just because both of those backs are spectacular. And I do think Roschon Johnson is just a guy, kind of. I don't think he's anything that special. So watching the battle here for running back, I think makes some sense. If it is going to be DeAndre Swift's role, and he's going to get, the huge workload, then he is going to absolutely crush his ADP. But if it's a 2-headed monster, I think DeAndre Swift is still probably a slight value, but Roschon Johnson is a huge value because he's going to get a lot of touchdowns probably in what could be a very, sought after offense.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to wide receiver, DJ Moore, maybe wide receiver 1. Rome Odunze was a bit disappointing for a lot of people that maybe took him in best ball, hoping that he would break out. Luther Burden, another interesting guy that I'm kind of high on here. Walk me through this wide receivers room and how this might shake out.
Yeah, there's really question marks with every one of them, and that's why this is a position battle to really kind of watch. So DJ Moore is expected to be the wide receiver 1. We know he's electric. We have seen huge seasons from him before, but he had some terrible body language last year. Ben Johnson has already been calling him out, and trying to get him to work. And so we don't totally know what we're going to see out of him. if he has totally bought in, and maybe it was just because he hated the offense last year and, the old coordinators and all that, then DJ Moore, where he's going, is a great value. Then we go down to Rome Odunze, who was a top 10 pick last year. He's, a big body. He's 6'3", runs a 4.45 40. Guy had the 13th rated contested catch rate at 54.5%. But then you get into his, target separation was low, 41st in the league. His yards per route run was 75th in the league. Just not what we totally want to see from a big time draft pick. But that also could be a situation where the offense just wasn't working well under the old staff, and maybe Ben Johnson comes in and solidifies Rome as, the big time prospect we thought, and then steps in Luther Burden.
Yeah.
If Rome really just isn't that good, DJ Moore takes a step back. You have a guy in Luther Burden who ran a 4.4 40 and is a second round pick and could slide into a big, volume workload. The issue with him, he got banged up in rookie camp, missed some of that time, is going to miss some of the training camp time. And so it could take him a while to really get up to speed and, be a real force in this offense.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Luther Burden at some point break out in a big way. This is a guy that many were predicting to be a first rounder, actually. And in fact, he has the size, the speed, the route running ability, all the things that you kind of require of a first rounder. The reason I think he dropped was his stats at Mizzou last year weren't as eye-popping as the year prior. However, a lot of that is due, they asked some of his Mizzou coaches, like what was the difference? And they said that basically teams just blanketed Luther Burden in coverage, but also his quarterback, Brady Cook, was dealing with a wrist injury and playing hurt the entire season. So just wasn't as effective in the passing game. So that explains a lot. And now, so you're getting a first rounder in the second round here. Luther Burden, I think, is definitely has all the qualities that you'd want in a first round draft pick wide receiver that could absolutely break out here, especially with an offensive line mind like Ben Johnson, who knows how to get the ball to playmakers and kind of scheme different things. So I'm definitely very intrigued, like you are, in the wide receiver room here with the Chicago Bears, and they could end up being super fantasy relevant here as the season progresses.
I like the whole Bears team. I think they're one that, if Ben Johnson is the genius that, people have kind of given him credit to be, then this offense could take a huge step forward. And if he could actually coach Caleb, if Caleb is coachable, he obviously has the intangibles. He was a number one pick. So if he can make another step forward, it's going to be a real interesting team.
And including that tight end position, which we briefly touch on the fact that they did draft Colston Loveland, but have Cole Kmet there as well. So like you said, every room there on offense is definitely one to watch. So let's move on, Tyler, from the Chicago Bears over to the Los Angeles Rams, who had quite the season last year, 10-7 playoff push. They almost knocked Philly out. They gave Philly a run for their money, more than the Chiefs did in the Super Bowl, might I add. But looking at this Rams team looking a little different. No more Cooper Kupp. He's in Seattle. They brought in Devontae Adams. So you're going to have the 1-2 punch there of Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams. But after that, Tyler, things get interesting. What's your take on the Los Angeles Rams and where you're watching?
Yeah, the Rams run a ton of 3 wide receiver sets. I looked at last season's snap counts. Demarcus Robinson was their wide receiver 3 last year. He was in on 994 snaps. That was 18th in the league. So it is a role that is going to put guys out there. And with that, I think it's one that we need to, pay a bit attention to, because there is big time upside. There's really 2 guys. There's Tutu Atwell and Jordan Whittingham that are going to be looking at that spot. Whittingham is the better blocker And that is one thing McVay really, really likes. And he's a guy that's not being drafted in most of these best ball contests. So I think he is very, very interesting. The other thing is he is a converted running back. And when he was used last year, they were using him all over the formation, kind of like they will Puka. So I think the upside with Winningham is super, super interesting. And I really like it. Tutu Atwell is the guy that is likely to get that job. He's kind of the known commodity there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, smaller bodied, not quite as good blocking. And so watching this battle is going to be super interesting for those deep best ball lineups.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Rams put 3 wide receivers on the field at the second highest rate in the NFL. They're also 8th in implied points for the entire season. So this is an offense that you likely want to get a good share of if you're drafting in best ball, especially with Matthew Stafford coming back in there as well, a solid quarterback, and a good offense, good coaching staff.
Yes. You throw out also the fact that it's like aging Devontae Adams. Puka Nacua got banged up last year, only played 11 games, had a history in college of getting banged up a lot. So there's other paths than just being, the third wide receiver as well.
All right. So elsewhere, let's go to the Seattle Seahawks and Cooper Kupp's new home. From his old home to his new home here. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Seattle team. Mixed outlook for them in 2025. Second-year head coach Mike Macdonald. Defense is a strong point of this team. So from a fantasy perspective, it's going to be interesting because this is a different look here. No Geno Smith. And it's going to be weird to see a wide receivers room for the Seattle Seahawks with no DK Metcalf. So what are you eyeing here?
So the thing that's so interesting to me here is Kubiak came from the Saints. Mm-hmm. If you remember the start of 2024 season, the first 2 weeks, the Saints were lighting the league on fire, back-to-back 40-plus weeks, and Kubiak looked like this genius. Nobody saw this one coming. Now, it was 2 of the, worst defense in the league that he faced. But if he can bring some of that genius to the Seattle team, it's very, very interesting. So we have JSN clear-cut wide receiver 1, then Cooper Kupp as the wide receiver 2. The issue here is that both of those guys are probably better in the slot. Both of them, kind of want to be in that position. But at Cooper Kupp's spot in his career, I think he has to stay in the slot. I don't think he can be effective outside, which means JSN probably plays a little more outside, but it also opens up a third wide receiver for these guys to play. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a guy that was with the Saints last season and had some success, followed Kubiak over to Seattle. I think he's an interesting one. He's very good with that deep shot. Then we have Torrey Horton, who's a rookie, and Jake Bobo. I think that third wide receiver in your, last pick is another one that is interesting for a little bit of an upside offense. I think one that nobody's really talking about, but I am very interested to see that Kubiak offense over here in Seattle.
Interested to see the Kubiak offense, especially a new quarterback, Sam Darnold, now there. I'm a little nervous about how that's all going to come together.
Well, yeah. Seattle's offense, or the Seattle offensive line, is definitely a question mark. Mm-hmm. If Kubiak can scheme that up a little bit, then Darnold can really kind of meet that potential. I mean, I don't think we can expect what he did last year, because he doesn't have Justin Jefferson and Addison. So step down in a receiving core here. But if they can protect him, I think there's still upside.
With that being said, any interest in an RB3 for the Seattle Seahawks at all in best ball fantasy? You got Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet. After that, is it a little murky, or are you eyeing these guys, or is this even fantasy relevant?
I mean, Damian Martinez has upside as an RB3, and it's another spot where, this offense is going to be very run heavy. So there could be room for Walker and Charbonnet to both have some weekly floor. Charbonnet being the one that we're not sure if he's going to have a weekly floor or not. But Damian Martinez is, break glass in case of emergency type last pick of a draft. There's absolutely upside. We've seen for years that Walker, year after year, it seems like he has some sort of energy or injury and Charbonnet steps up. What if Sharbs gets hurt also? Exactly. I think Damian Martinez, the new draft pick's likely the one that gets the call then.
Sure. You never know what's going to happen with those RB. Of course, volume is king in that situation. And maybe
Kubiak's just cursed.
that Saints, they were decimated by injuries that year. All right, let's move on to a team with some promise on their offense, and that is the Tampa Bay Bucks. We've seen them put together a lot of points, and that's great for fantasy purposes. They have the 9th most implied points for this season, and actually the 5th most in the fantasy playoffs, which is worth noting. But this is definitely a team that you want some players in if you are drafting in best ball. Definitely some Mike Evans. Look at that wide receivers room. We got Chris Godwin and Emeka Egbuka. What are you watching at this Tampa training camp?
All right. The big thing here is we know Chris Godwin got hurt last season. Another bad leg injury, this time to his ankle. They signed him. He's coming back. One, we need to see what his progress is like. When is he going to be on the field? Is it going to be week 1? There's absolutely a chance of that. And then there's another layer to this is where is he going to play? Last year, Cohen moved him back to the slot and he absolutely dominated. When he was out there, Mike Evans took a big hit. Now, I am very, very interested to see how they're going to use Godwin, because if they push him out wide and have Egbuka running that slot, I think it hurts Godwin big time and it helps Mike Evans. But if Godwin's in the slot, it'll be a little harder, I think, for Egbuka to really make his name early in the season, and then Mike Evans definitely gets dinged and he's probably going a little overvalued where he's being drafted now. So I think this is a camp battle that we really need to watch and get some ideas where they're going to line up.
Okay, so it's not just about the personnel, it's about, or the volume necessarily, it's literally where they're lining up on the field as opposed to your traditional battle of, got it. All right, keep an eye on it.
The differences from Mike Evans and Godwin, when Godwin was in the slot versus outside, is huge.
Yeah.
And, he's like an average wide receiver when he's outside, and he absolutely dominated when he was inside.
So that's the storyline. We will be watching where those Tampa Bay Bucks are lining up. Next up, let's go to the Denver Broncos. And definitely a room that we're looking at. I know a lot of fantasy owners are eyeing that running back room because they know there are points to be had there, and a Sean Payton-led offense there in Denver. Bo Nix coming back looking pretty good last year. So they drafted R.J. Harvey, who Sean Payton has been super high on. They also brought in a veteran in J.K. Dobbins. What do you make of the running backs room in Denver?
I think it's an interesting one to watch. Look, there is the chance that RJ Harvey is going a little overdrafted right now. From week 1, J.K. Dobbins is probably going to get a very big role. And then we're not totally sure when RJ Harvey will take a big step himself, but he's a versatile back that ran a 4.40 and is likely to, get the higher value touches, getting the passing work, and, maybe some goal line touches just because they can move him around and do so much stuff with him. So I will be watching this. If we get any inklings that, it is kind of RJ Harvey's job from day one, I will be slamming as much RJ Harvey as I possibly can.
And anything relevant from your perspective as to this wide receivers room? Cortland Sutton, obviously your wide receiver 1 there, but Marvin Mims, Vele, they also drafted Pat Bryant there. Are any of those guys standing out to you, or are you just going to wait and see what happens in camp?
I think this is something that's gone really overlooked. So last season, Cortland Sutton, far and away wide receiver 1. After him, it was pretty much a timeshare. Little Jordan Humphrey, Vele, Mims, Franklin all played between 326 and 555 snaps. There was no wide receiver 2. It was Sutton and then the rest. So I want to see if Mims only took 326 snaps last year. He was the last of them all. See if he really is the wide receiver 2, because in Underdog and DraftKings right now, he is being drafted as the wide receiver 2 for this team. But it really could just be he's with everybody else. And if that's the case, you might as well take, Franklin or Pat Bryant way later in this draft than draft Marvin Mims. So I think it is very interesting. And there's the chance that Marvin Mims is just going way overdrafted right now.
All right, let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Can Trevor Lawrence get the Jags back on track with a new head coach there in Liam Cohen, an offensive mind that comes over as the offensive coordinator in Tampa? Definitely has had some success with some fantasy studs over there. And even prior, he has coached previously at the Los Angeles Rams. So hoping he can turn this Jags team around with Trevor Lawrence at the helm. And also some fantasy guys that are definitely going to put up some points this season. There are question marks, though. Let's start with the running backs room here. Travis Etienne has been great in fantasy, but will that remain? Or you got Tank Bigsby there and also Bashal Tutin. What do you think?
So Travis Etienne is going to get the first shot, and I think it's his job to lose coming into this season. There is absolutely the situation that it could be like another Bucky Irving situation. After all, Liam Cohen was with Tampa Bay last year. Similar situation where we had an RB1 who had been good in years prior, but they drafted a guy that really has some juice. In this situation, Bashal Tutin is that guy. 4th round, exciting running back. He's 206 pounds, runs a 4.3 40. The guy is versatile. He can play all over. Super interesting. So there's the chance that it could just be Etienne's job to start this season, and then it's Tutin to finish, similar to what Bucky Irving did. Now, I do think that Tutin will have to be undeniable to be that, but there's that path and he becomes interesting. But there's also another scenario where it's a timeshare. They got Etienne and they have Bigsby as the 1-2 kind of force, similar to what Ben Johnson has done in the past in, Detroit, where Tank Bigsby, the better runner, probably through the tackles, incumbent RB2, just takes the goal line work, and then neither of these guys are that exciting. But I think it is one to watch to get any sort of glimpse of what's going on and how exciting Tutin is, because he could be the giant winner here. But if Etienne's good, he will literally have to steal the job from him.
Well, we'll be keeping our eye out for that one. We're also keeping our eye on the wide receivers there because they got a new one. Travis Hunter is going to be wide receiver there. But one guy we talked about on yesterday's show, which was late round targets, De'Ami Brown is there as well. What are you watching here amongst these wide receivers for best ball purposes?
It's Travis Hunter. We're watching where is he going to be lining up the most and how many snaps is he going to play? Is he going to play a ton of wide receiver? Is he going to play a ton of cornerback? It's really up in the air. If he's only playing 50, 60% of the snaps, then he's being way overdrafted where he's at now. And it's going to lead routes for De'Ami Brown, Parker Washington to pick up, the pace and absolutely have a shot. It also lets Brian Thomas be the clear-cut wide receiver 1, where he will be playing every single game and used all over the field. So you got to love that. But I think this offense is just super exciting. Liam Cohen, torched the league last year with that Tampa Bay offense. They were incredible. And we have another shot at drafting like Tampa Bay light. Maybe the offensive line isn't quite as good, but they do have skill guys all over the place.
Well, I know another team where we're going to be keeping a very close eye on a particular position. I think all fantasy owners across the country are going to be eyeing what Pittsburgh is doing with their running backs room, because that is a very valuable job. They had the 4th most rushing attempts in 2024. Najee Harris is no longer there. Right now, Jaylen Warren, it's his job to be had, but behind him is the 3rd round selection from Iowa, Caleb Johnson. What are you looking for in this battle?
It's all about, is it Jaylen Warren's job, or is Caleb Johnson just going to take over that Najee-like role? He's kind of a similar guy to Najee, not super explosive, can do it all, can, handle a huge workload. And we really just want to see how he's doing in pass protection to stay out there. If he's making some mistakes, Aaron Rodgers is going to want him off the field, and it could just be a huge workload for Jaylen Warren. And Jaylen Warren, we know, is an explosive guy. So if he gets a bigger workload, where he's being taken, he's right around, I think, 97 ADP is a super big value if he's going to have, say, 60% of the workload.
Yeah, I've seen the hype train rolling, though, for Caleb Johnson right now.
Totally.
An article recently basically named him the starter by the end of September. So, they haven't really had any meaningful snaps yet, but it's nice to.
That's what everybody thinks. I think it's a spot to watch. Warren is good. He got banged up last year in a spot where we thought he was going to get a bigger workload, and he just really wasn't that healthy until the very end of the season. And then we saw, that a little bit more explosiveness out of him, and he started to take that snap share away from Najee. So I do think coming into this season, there's a chance we're seeing him, on the field 55, 60% of the snaps. And I would say it's likely at least for like the first 4 weeks or so. But after that, who knows? It's a 3rd round rookie. We had a super deep running back class here. These guys, these rookie guys are going to be a force this year. So
definitely something to watch in training camp. And if you guys are following LineStar on Twitter, be sure to check out the thread that Tyler put together with all of the teams and breaking down what you need to be watching from a fantasy perspective as we open up training camps across the country here. So definitely go check that out on the LineStar Twitter. And I know we covered a bunch right today, but that's not all of it. Tyler broke it all down, so make sure to check that out on Twitter if you haven't already. And do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment below. Let us know if there's any battles you are keeping your eye on for training camp this summer. Crazy that the season is coming fast approaching here, and definitely exciting to see who's going to be emerging as some of these RB1s, wide receiver, just to see who's going to get the lion's share of the work this season. And there's still so much to be determined over the next couple weeks that we have to keep our eye on, especially if you guys are out there drafting best ball. So should be exciting. We'll definitely be keeping our eye on it. Keep your eye on this YouTube channel because we'll be coming out with content focusing on best ball and best ball strategies. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and sign up for those notifications so you know when we come out with videos. During the season, we'll be coming out with weekly previews, player prop bets, the whole season. So make sure you stick with the LineStar YouTube channel. Good luck in all of your best ball drafts. Hopefully we gave you some advice that maybe help you reconsider some of where you're taking people in best ball. But good luck. We'll see you next time.